Hi guys, I want to talk about one of my favorite fantasy stories of all time. This is, if you guys love fantasy or you guys like science fiction, it's kind of the same genre, but one of my favorite fantasy stories of all time is this book here, and this is called Elric of Melnibone. Elric of Melnibone is actually, I think, one of the best fantasy stories of all time, and at the same time, it's one of the least known. The thing about this is that Michael Moorcock wrote this, and Michael Moorcock is really popular, famous in kind of like the UK, in England, London, places like that. So places outside of England, not a lot of people know about him. But for a while, he still has some stuff in the science fiction and fantasy section of the bookshop. And he's really a good writer, and I really think his best writing is this Elric of Melnibone book. So I've got these. This is the first one you'd read, and this is called, this is the first one, this is the first story, and this is Elric of Melnibone. That's the first one, and I've got a few of them. It's that one. The second one is this one here, which is Sailor on the Seas of Fate. And what I love about this one is that it's got, the cover is done by Michael Whelan. This is one of my favorite illustrations. And because the cover is done by Michael Whelan, I think this was the original cover. And this was the older publisher, DAW Books. Michael Whelan just does great, paintings of Elric and that whole character. Really brings the whole idea of the character together. And the thing is there's that Sailor on the Seas of Fate, and there's this Sailor on the Seas of Fate. And this is also done, this cover is also done by a really good fantasy artist, but you can see the whole thing with the art in this one, it's more of a flat 2D style. With Whelan, it's more like a photoreal style sort of painting. But this was the original one. This is the one that they used to have when, this was during the 80s when Elric was really popular, and Elric you can get at any bookshop. You will see the whole collection of all of the Elric books. So basically the story starts with, he's a king of he's the emperor of this land called Melnibone, which is a fictional land, but it might be based on France or some kind of a French city or something like that. I think that the author based it on something French because he used a French accent on it. It's said with a sort of a French accent, which is Melnibone, and it sounds like kind of a French city. And so you have that one, and the second one, which is Sailor on the Seas of Fate, is just a continuation. Now the cool thing about these books is they're really thin. They're really small. Each book, this first one has about 160 pages. These are so easy to read that you read one and then you go on to the second one. It's so well written, and it's very fantasy oriented. It's very fantasy, and it is more it's a story and it stays fantasy, and it's that sword and sorcerer kind of story. Basically, Elric is a sorcerer. He's a huge magician. He basically and he's got this sword that's intelligent, but is sort of like a vampire sword that keeps on eating his friends when it feels like it. So that's the thing about it, the sword. And he goes on this massive adventure after his cousin usurps the throne that he's on, and instead of trying to get the throne back, he lets his cousin keep the throne. His cousin's more like an evil villain in the story. He lets his cousin keep the throne and instead decides to leave Melnibone and go on a journey to explore the rest of the universe. Or in Michael Moorcock's stories, it's called the multiverse, because the characters go from one dimension to another dimension, and not only travel to different lands, but to other planes of existence and to different dimensions, where they actually find themselves as a different person. The same person, the same incarnation, their self, they're who they are. But when they go to another plane, they find themselves as different people in those planes, and now like he's able to talk to a person who's a different person, but is really him. It's really him, but he doesn't like. But because it's another dimension, it's a different person. Basically, he exists on all of these different planes as different people. And what's interesting about the story is he meets all of these people, and he meets them in the second. And this is when Sailor on the Seas of Fate comes out, which means that this is when he actually starts to travel and starts to kind of like explore the world. And basically, even in the picture, you can see like, that's a really cool picture of him. It's actually a better like illustration when you actually look at the illustration, but it's really cool. And he meets like, and the thing is, he joins the people that he meets. He joins all of these incarnations of himself, and they go on adventures together. So it's real interesting with that. And the third book is this one, and I know it's the third book because it says it here on the bottom, is Weird of the White Wolf. This is also done by Michael Whalen. And as you can see, like, this is a illustration of Elric and his demon sword. And as you can see, the demon sword just basically eats whoever it wants to eat. You know, it'll just destroy whoever it wants to. But at the same time, it gives him all of this power. I love the cover of this one. And then let me see. There's the fourth one. I showed you the third one. The fourth one is The Vanishing Tower, and this is also just more of the adventures. And what you can see here in the illustration, that's, you know, Elric, and this is the sword. And the sword is basically a rune sword. It's a black sword, but as you can see, it's got these runes. And the runes in it is these ruby red runes, and the runes kind of light up, and they're magic, and there's something like that. And then after that, you get book 5. You get book 5 of the Elric Saga. You get book 5, and that is Bane of the Black Sword. The thing about these stories are they're real easy to read, and it's a whole collection. I think there's 5. These are 5. But there's more than that. There's a couple more ones. One is called Fortress of the Pearl, which is supposed to be the sequel to the first one. However, Sailor on the Seas of Fate says it's the second one, so I don't know. I think Sailor on the Seas of Fate is the second one, but I think there's 2 second ones. But there's Sailor on the Seas of Fate, I think that is the second one because it just makes sense in the continuity of the story. So what's really interesting about this one, this is like the coolest story ever. If you guys have actually read these, or let me know what you thought, because everyone that reads these, and I recommend this to anyone that likes fantasy, or you think you could like this kind of story, I recommend this to anybody who wants to read them, because generally speaking, everyone that reads these becomes a huge fan. And not a lot of people know this story. For some reason, this is, even though like a lot of people know this story, it's got like sort of a cult following where not a lot of people really know the story. And so basically, okay, so Elric his people are not of Earth. They're not regular human people. You know, instead of like humans, the evolution of their people, or the evolution of who they are, is different. They're not like evolved like people are evolved. They're basically an evolution of dragons. Like before they were dragons before they were people, you know, and they evolved into people, but they evolved from dragons. So they have very like dragon-like features. They ride dragons, and there's just a lot of like everything in the story, in the world is basically controlled by magic. It's controlled by these gods who basically they are like gods of chaos and they're gods of law. And the gods of chaos are always at war with the gods of law. One god is not better than the other. It's not like one is good and one is evil. One is just chaos and one is law. And there's a huge prevalence of evil. Like there's a lot of evil. For example, the patron deity of Elric, and he always calls upon his patron deity whenever he's in trouble, whenever he needs some kind of assistance with any of the adventures that he's on. Like he might be being like destroyed by some enemy, and at the last minute he'll say a spell and he will get supernatural aid. Like he'll get like the deity, he'll get like the god, like whoever it is that he's asking for help will actually come down and help him and destroy his enemy, or take him out of that situation somehow. And so, but the thing is that his patron deity is Arioch, and Arioch is a god of chaos. And he basically he helps him when he feels like it, and at other times he kind of gets in his way. But there's the gods of the whole place. There's the fact that all of Melniboneans, they're basically evil. And his people are just generally evil, nasty, really bad people that it's just, they all, the way he describes it is that they're horrible, they do these terrible things. And this is the thing about him being emperor there, and why he was usurped from being an emperor, because he was an emperor of Melnibone. But the thing is, he was against and doing any like cruel things to people or evil things to people. He was like a good emperor. He wanted to do the right thing. He wanted to do good things for his people. He wanted to do good things for his country. Of course, like he would defend Melnibone, defend his borders from pirates or from invading armies that were constantly trying to invade him. And of course, he would defend them against that. He was a great warrior that would defend his people against the invaders. But at the same time, he believed in, mercy, and he believed in treating his people really, really well, and not doing these cruel things. And the thing about his people and his whole culture is cruelty was expected from the emperor. And he really wasn't. It wasn't him. He didn't feel like being a bad person or a cruel person. And this is one of the reasons that, his cousin, whose name is Irkun, his cousin basically usurped the throne. He said, this guy is not fit to be emperor. He's not a regular Melnibonean, and Irkun was more of like a standard Melnibonean. He was very evil. He was cruel. He would do horrible things to people. And he decided to take the throne. And Elric was like, he doesn't really care. He didn't really care about being emperor or anything like that. But he did want to explore the lands and go out there and see what's outside of where he kind of grew up and where he was. So this is where his adventure goes to another place. And the thing is that somewhere along the way, Irkun, who is the person that usurped, he didn't really care that he usurped the throne, but he basically abducted Elric's, I think it was his cousin or something like that. Yeah, Elric's cousin, who Elric loved his cousin, and he had abducted her and put the spell on her to make her sleep or something like that. And Elric was like, he had to save her from that. And he couldn't go, like, he needed to do something. He needed to actually be able to do this. And Irkun was like a really, really powerful mage, a really powerful magician, and his magic was really, really hard to combat. So Elric needed some kind of edge. So he went to get this sword, and the sword is Stormbringer. This sword is a vampire sword that is able to pretty much, like, it can destroy anyone just by one cut and the person's done. Like, there's no, it doesn't have to actually like be any kind of like significant cut. As long as it cuts him a little bit, the sword has gotten, kind of like drinks his essence and whatever. But the thing is that this sword came in two kinds. You know, there was Stormbringer and there was Mournblade. And the Stormbringer is the one he had, but Yyrkoon, his cousin, got the sister sword. And he had to actually go against his own cousin. He needed something. He needed some kind of magic, some kind of power, so he can like save his cousin from Yyrkoon. And so this is why he got the sword Stormbringer. The thing is, once he got Stormbringer, he was not able to get rid of that Stormbringer at all. And Stormbringer became more of a hassle than anything else. The sword was inherently evil and would do evil things and would get him to do evil things that he didn't want to do. So it's real interesting. And the rest of the story is like him going out, adventuring other worlds, using all kinds of this crazy magic. Maybe he would summon these powers, these beings, to help him or somehow overthrow his enemies or somehow whatever it is. And he would actually, the rest of the story is him going on this basically journey. And the thing is that he goes on this journey with this sword, and the sword is as much a character in the story as Elric is. And this is, and he could not get rid of the sword no matter what. And even when he did want to get rid of the sword and kind of put the sword away and not use it anymore, he would always come upon these enemies that were horrible, that were going to destroy his whole world, and or something called upon him to go on a journey and destroy a certain enemy or a certain malevolent kind of person that was kind of really destroying things and doing horrible magic to people. And what would happen was he would always go back to this sword. It's sort of like, I don't know if I wouldn't make this sort of like a Lord of the Rings thing. And I really don't know who started the story, but with Lord of the Rings, it was kind of the same thing with Lord of the Rings, where, you know, they would have the ring, and once you have this ring, you can't get rid of it. It does this great power, it does things to you, but you get addicted to this ring, and you can't live without it. And even though this ring is kind of like, it's good, but it's also bad, and you really shouldn't use it. But that's kind of like the similarity between Lord of the Rings. But the ring is just like, I think it just made someone invisible, or it does certain things and whatever. Whereas this story, this Michael Moorcock, the hero is more of an anti-hero. He's not really, you know, a hero. He doesn't save anything. You know, he's more of like, he's partly hero and part anti-hero. He's partly good, but he's also partly evil. And he'll do things, he's generally good, but he will also do evil. And yeah, so it's just an amazing story. That a lot of people have missed this, and it's kind of like a hidden gem. The people that understand the story really love it, and the people that don't kind of like just don't know anything about it. And that, I think, that has to do with, like, I think basically in America, you don't really get this in the bookshop for some reason. You don't get this in the bookshop. These old ones, you get these older issues, you can get this in like a used bookshop in the sci-fi fantasy section. So yeah, so if you guys like this story, or if there's anything about this story that interests you, please let me know in the comments. And please like and subscribe to my channel if you like this video. And yeah, so I just wanted to bring this up. This is great. This is great. So, you know, I just want to bring this up to the people that are familiar with the story, have read the story. You know, when was the first time you read it? Like, how long ago did you read the story? And the people that haven't read these books, you got to check it out. You can get these on a digital download. It's a lot cheaper than having to buy them. I know, when we bought these, I remember buying these, and these were like super cheap. This is $4.50 US. And the ones that came out before then were $1.95. This doesn't happen anymore, but these novels are like, the regular prices now are probably like $6.95 or whatever. And if you get these used, you know what's cool about the used versions are the covers are really cool. If you get these DAW books, And I know people love to like collect these just because of the covers, and you know, it just wasn't a lot. I know like when you get these used, they're like $2 or something. It's really, really easy. And these are available for download. The thing about like Elric is that it has evolved into these more and more modern, and the last few Elric stories were a little bit not exactly, they weren't exactly the same. They weren't like that sword and sorcery story. They were kind of done more in a modern kind of era, but I like these more. I like the old 5 or 6 of them, the 5 or 6 that they really started with as the coolest fantasy stories. They're not hard to read. These are written so well. Moorcock is really, really descriptive. You get this really, really vivid idea of what everything looks like in the stories. You get this like, and it's really, really, it's told really well. It's really clear. You don't understand it. He's not wordy. He doesn't like go into words, and he really does tell the story really, really well. I really love how he tells the story. And again, this has to be one of, if not my favorite, it's definitely one of my favorite fantasy stories of all time. Check it out if you haven't, and if you have, let me know what you think of these stories, because I know like a lot of people love this subject. There's also comic books that came out with this. There's graphic novels that came out with these that are really good, and they're illustrated, and the illustrations are really, really good. So yeah, but I know like I read these before I read the comic books, and I just was a huge fan ever since I read these. So yeah, so I just wanted to like share some of these Elric Saga stories since they're so good. All right, and I'll see you guys in another video. Take care.